Some standard 5-star characters are better than others. Some are absolutely fantastic, even with no dupes at all. Some scale dramatically with those copies as you lose your 50/50s. Others are just a disappointment, regardless of how many copies you have. When we factor in the exceedingly high credit and resource cost to max out these characters, especially at UL 50, there's a lot of potential to invest resources, specifically time-gated ones, into characters you won't be touching again. In short, at this point in the game, you need every resource you can get, and resources spent on a character can't be refunded. When you invest in one character, you aren't investing in another. Today's discussion is focused on one topic. Who are the standard 5-star characters worth investing in for the long run? Who can you build now and still receive benefit from later? To answer this question, we'll be diving into the entire 5-star standard character roster, going from the least future-proof to most. We'll break down what they can offer to their teams at a baseline, how they scale with the inevitable copies you'll obtain as you lose your 50/50s, and what synergies they could provide in the future for other teams. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. There are 5 standard 5-star characters. 3 of them are main DPS characters. It's a tale as old as time that we've seen across countless gacha games. The standard 5-star DPS characters are almost always the ones that get replaced first, primarily due to the fact that these companies have to sell their limited units. Within Wuthering Waves, Lingyang, Calcharo, and Encore are the characters that fall into this category. All 3 of these characters center around one general concept: an empowered state, either from their Forte circuit, like with Lingyang, or with their Resonance Liberation, like with Calcharo and Encore. While they all offer a unique and varied playstyle when it comes to combat, like Lingyang's aerial maneuvers, Encore's extremely fast attacks, and Calcharo's complicated rotations, an unfortunate fact of the present is that these characters simply deal less damage than the limited 5-stars. Considering the fact that 2 out of our 4 limited character banners so far have been main DPS characters, it's very likely that a player, if they've pulled on those characters, have invested time and resources into them instead, and experienced better performance. However, the other 2 limited characters we've seen, Yinlin and Changli, directly support Calcharo and Encore, equipped with outro skills that synergize very well with those 2 kits. This directly increases the value of these 2 characters if a player has pulled on those banners, as they'll perform in some of the strongest teams in the present. But a player has to keep in mind that future limited main DPS characters will likely replace them, and if some of the rumors that have been floating around are true, this could be a rough situation for those who have invested a lot into Calcharo. Nevertheless, even if limited characters that replace their roles are released, these releases will be bundled with favorable Tower of Adversity blessings that can revive a character's viability across that content, with Calcharo getting some of the big bonuses during Yinlin's release and Encore receiving those same benefits with Changli's. However, Calcharo and Encore's situation isn't nearly as rough as Lingyang's. This child has virtually no support at all other than Sanhua. There isn't a Yinlin or Changli for Ice, and with his aerial focused playstyle immediately overshadowed by the release of Jianxin and Changli, there just doesn't feel like there's much incentive at all to build or use him. Overall, 2 of the 3 standard DPS characters are acceptable to work with, mainly if you have one of their limited teammates. Unfortunately, these characters have another devastating downside to investing in them: the existence of Rover. The main character, specifically their Havoc version, is an incredibly powerful and smooth DPS that can fit into a wide variety of teams. In many situations, their strength can be comparable to, or even exceed the performance of standard 5-stars, like Calcharo and Encore, when used with their biz teammates like Yinlin and Changli. Considering the fact that Rover is completely free to acquire and much cheaper to level than any other character, it can feel a lot better to work with them instead. Fortunately, with more sequence nodes and dupes, the roles of these main DPS characters can shift entirely. While 5 out of 6 of these 3 DPS's sequence nodes are focused entirely on buffing their damage or resonance energy generation, every single DPS on the standard banner has a very unique upgrade at Sequence Node 4. They apply a team-wide attribute damage buff for their attribute whenever they activate their outro skill, or in Encore's case her Forte circuit, which is always used when she's switching out anyways. This can effectively shift their role entirely from a main DPS with an extended amount of field time into a sub-DPS buffer that focuses on fast rotations and concerto energy buildup to buff other members of the team. Doubling up on this capability with a supportive set like Moonlit Clouds means that you can breathe new life into these characters as you progress through the game and accumulate those dupes, and can be a great silver lining to losing 50/50s on the limited banner. Unfortunately, you can only unlock this potential by getting lucky or unlucky, depending on your perspective. And it's very unlikely for any player that hasn't been spending thousands of dollars to even have this many copies at this point in the game. With that, we've covered the DPS characters. Our next character up is, in my opinion, the one that scales the best with Sequence Node copies. Jianxin is a hybrid shielder, healer, grouper, and damage dealer that scales primarily off attack. At a baseline S0 level, she can provide fantastic amounts of grouping, durability, and resonance liberation buffing that makes her an excellent slot in on teams that focus on ultimates to deal a majority of their damage. Unfortunately, her kit takes a while to ramp up, especially at sequence level 0. Building up her Forte circuit and activating it can take a significant amount of time, and so in a lot of time-focused content like the Tower of Adversity, her main role is a grouper and rejuvenating glow activator with the Originite gauntlets. However, even with these downsides, Jianxin appears very future-proof. There may be characters that group and deal damage better than her, like Jian. There may be characters that shield better than her, like Tao Qi. There may be characters that heal better than her, like Baizha and Verina. But is there any character that does all of these at once? Factor in her outro skill that works universally on any team regardless of attribute, and you have a character that can work across a large variety of different characters, both now and in the future. It's hard to imagine a new limited character that will do everything Jianxin does, but better, while it's much easier to imagine that for a standard 5-star DPS character. Jianxin sequence nodes are also some of the best, if not the best, on the standard roster. Her first 3 sequence nodes all dramatically increase the speed with which she generates her Forte circuit, while her last node outright removes the channel on her Forte circuit completely. In my eyes, losing a 50-50 to Jianxin should be considered a win, because you're one step closer to this unbelievable upgrade. The last character up might need no explanation at all. Verina is good. So good, in fact, that she ranks number 1 across virtually every single tier list and 5-star selector guide, and it's all for very valid reasons. Equipped with long-lasting universal buffs, incredibly fast rotation times, and synergy across virtually every single team, Verina is easily the most future-proof character on the standard 5-star roster. With the need to run at least 3 separate teams across endgame content, and Verina's viability on pretty much every team, there's little risk that a new character, even with better buffing abilities or a faster rotation, will replace her role entirely. Unfortunately, Verina's sequence nodes aren't that amazing, most of them focusing on increasing her healing ability, which isn't that helpful in the current content, but can open the door to sub-DPS builds that focus on Verina's personal damage. However, she has 2 fantastic buffing upgrades. First one on S2, which shortens her rotation times even further, and S4, which grants her team a fantastic spectral damage buff. Overall, copies of her are great to build up to S2 or S4, but just aren't as impactful compared to a character like Jianxin. When it comes to the standard 5-star characters, some are better than others, but they all serve varied and unique roles, at least now, across their teams. DPS characters might just have these roles replaced a lot sooner than others. However, as players acquire more copies of these 5-stars, there's a lot of potential to find new use cases over time. But for now, my ranking is as follows from least worthwhile investments to most: Lingyang, Calcharo, Encore, Jianxin, and Verina. Hopefully this overview was helpful in highlighting where you might want to spend your limited resources. When you invest in one character, you aren't investing in another. And with the massive amount of resources it takes to max a character out, the one thing you don't want is buyer's remorse. Peace out.